Alrighty, welcome everybody to part 3 of the solo challenge run. So next up here, we gotta go through a little bit of plot and do all that kind of thing. Actually, we got the House Diderot stuff coming up next, aka the kind of bulky boys that run the Northern Castle area there. Now, normally this one can be a little bit of an iffy challenge sometimes, depending on what kind of challenge run you're running. Like, especially if you're doing like a low equipment run, or if you're doing a no crafting, no grinding, or whatever else. Usually, this is one of those parts of that route that that can get to be a little bit of a problem. Mostly because these guys are a little bit tanky. Pretty much any time that you end up running into Hector or Zabos, or when those ones start to get into issues. Anyhow, because we're pretty well overpowered at this point, though, they're not going to be as much of a problem. I'm going to go ahead and grab a plume there just to make it that little bit extra, a little bit extra there. It's not necessarily necessary for this point. We're basically strong enough to one-shot anything without any real issues, but I just figured, what the hell, might as well just kind of guarantee it, as it were. Not to mention, sometimes they end up wasting their time trying to dispel stuff, which we'll end up seeing a whole lot more later on. There's not really much of that right now, but as before, I was just kind of trying to get some other equipment here. As you can see, they're kind of getting some bullcrap odds with those 25%. So you'll see that a lot. And it actually makes me wonder if there's maybe some kind of scaling percentage where after, you're kind of overwhelmed for a while, or rather if you're at a numbers disadvantage, maybe the odds of something hitting you are higher. They might be saying, hey, that's a little bit too out there of a mechanic, surely, but there's some really bizarrely specific mechanics out in this game. So figured, you know what, maybe it's possible. I'm fairly certain at this point that that luck completely overrides hit chance and parry chance and all that kind of thing. Or rather, no, I think it overrides hit chance. I think parry chance still trumps wow, I'm bad at words today. You know what I mean. You know what I mean. I think it still beats that thing. So yeah, ended up getting a little bit lower on health here, because Hector can still hit a pretty decent chunk. We're never really going to get to the point that we're going to be entirely invulnerable over the course of this run. We're more or less invincible to magical stuff right now, but when it comes to melee, and especially ranged, it's not really a point that you ever reach. I'm not really sure why they didn't like casters that much. Like, they give them so many toys to play with, and an over-leveled caster can be pretty darn decent, but man, they're like, compared with everything else, they just drop off in damage so hard as soon as they hit their little wall there. I mean, casters, for the most part, with exception to a couple of debuffs, are almost entirely worthless for the entire rest of this run, just so you know. Petrification gets to be a problem, Shackle gets to be a problem, and actually, the final build of this character ended up having to kind of build around those two in particular, because I ended up going with Stone Proof, ended up getting armor with Stop Proof, and getting a weapon with Fear Proof. Because Fear, weirdly enough, is also one of those ones that can completely screw you in a solo run, just because it drops all your stats so severely that it puts you out of insta-kill range for a lot of things, even when over-leveled. So yeah, then there's one thing that the Mr. Foles pointed out to me a while ago. It's just, it seems like they put so many hurdles in the way to try to make sure that somebody, wouldn't want to go ahead and do this. And it's interesting because from a design perspective, this game always kind of fascinated me, because it's like this whole bizarre process where instead of, tailoring exact situations as they went throughout the game, they just kept creating, okay, we made this mechanic. Hold on, wait, it's broken in this way. Quick, let's introduce this other mechanic. Oh wait, that's broken. Okay, let's introduce this other mechanic. And so, it always kind of just felt like they kept going and going and going until eventually they're like, well, I mean, it works. I guess we're good now. It's a fascinating thing there, because, I was working on this article recently, comparing, just kind of contrasting the designs of this between this Night of Lotus and the original Snes game. And it's kind of funny because, yeah, in the original Snes game, they seem mostly all about the setting and the story and all that kind of thing. And, some of the early game balance really flew aside. Around mid-game, end-game, it tended to be a little bit more sensible. Granted, they did overlook some stuff like stacking elements and stuff like that, but, for the most part, it was interesting. It got the job done, and you know, generally felt pretty darn good. Now, oh, by the way, I don't think I can announce it yet, but let's just say that there's something cool in the works for that one. Anyway, aside from that, though, looking at Knight of Lotus, like, I think my best example, or not my best example, I think my favorite example between all of them, because it always is, was a spear, right? Because, okay, in each of these games, you can get a spear relatively early. Funny part is, the earliest one that you can get is in the PSP remake, and that thing is trash. Like, the standard bronze spear is utter garbage, not to mention it's actually falsely advertised, because it says, hey, even the greenest of warriors can use it. The warrior class can't use it. But, oh well. Anyway, yeah, I know, it's one of the first things I petitioned the One Vision mod for. It's just, I don't know, it always bugged me since the very first day that I got that game. I thought it was bugged, to be honest. Because my favorite thing in Knight of Lotus was always just, like, running a bunch of pikemen and just, like, putting them on either sides of a unit and having them stab back and forth. And yeah, like, I couldn't do that anymore, because I was looking at it like, but there's my soldier dudes, and there's my spear dudes, why are they different? Which, ultimately, Rakes actually pointed out this whole thing later on as far as how all the numbers broke down. And I can kind of see where they were coming from, balance-wise, as to why they didn't give warriors spears, just because double stab spears or mighty strike spears would have been, just a little bit busted, but, you know, oh well. Oh well. Moving on, though. So, okay. Basic spear, right? So, the basic one, okay, you end up doing, like, maybe 20-ish damage in the PSP version. In Knight of Lotus, you end up doing about 20 to 40, depending on who's using it. And there goes Mr. Hector, as you can see, and his ridiculously high vitality doesn't really do very much in this particular instance. And it's at this point that we're given the choice to hire Yunin. It's like, yeah, no, I guess we won't hire him. Like, well, they didn't do anything, so they're not our enemy. It's a very slight word difference as to whether or not Yunin will join you. But just figured Man of the Sword sounds like a cooler title. I think you get like Man of Peace or something like that if you end up hiring him. Again, it's a really minor difference. Anyway, so going back to that conversation about the spear there. So yeah, you end up getting that spear in the PSP game, and you know it's just already in the store, pretty basic, doesn't really stick out too much. You get the one in the Snes game, and usually the first one you're going to get is from Canopus. You can end up picking up another one later on in the first chapter. But yeah, it's the thing hits really dang hard, except it seems to scale a whole bunch. So, like, for example, just recently I was going through a run there. It's like, for your main characters and for Canopus and everybody, it's nearly a one-shot weapon, but then for everybody else, it's, like, barely better than a short sword. It's just, there was a lot of scaling, I think. I don't really know a lot of the background mechanics of the SNES PS1 version, but I know as far as Knight of Lotus goes, the overall balance of that one always struck me. Just because like, even if you got your stats over leveled and everything else, there were certain cases that, yeah, you could completely break the balance, but unlike the other ones, there tended to be a lot more rubber banding. And I kind of hope that whenever, if and when they ever make a sequel, that there's more of that. Now, what do I mean by rubber banding? That spear that I was talking about, it will usually be 20 to 40, regardless of who's using it, with the only difference being what it's actually hitting. So, like, if one person that's really strong uses it, okay, it'll be on the higher end of the damage, but, you know, it won't be insanely overpowered. Meanwhile, you know, if somebody weaker is using it, it's going to be weaker, but it's not going to do 1 damage. Most of the time. If there's a really drastic difference in levels or something like that, you know, yeah, sure, it'll still happen. But for the most part, under most scenarios that you would regularly play the game, you don't see that whole, like, 1 damage or insane damage scenario, which is basically one of the things that drew me a lot to One Vision when I first started. Because, like, that about Knight of Lotus always just, like, really spoke to me there. It's like, okay, this makes sense, here's their equipment, you know, here's how it hurts, here's how it doesn't. It is a physical thing, it isn't like they got super beefy and now suddenly this little wooden stick can suddenly destroy the universe. Which, again, it's possibly just a personal preference thing, but anyway, I'd be curious to hear what you guys thought of the balance between all those three. So, Next up, we're doing a little bit of crafting here, getting a little bit of equipment up. I was kind of deciding whether it was actually worth it to fly up to Balder from the leather there. I had a few close calls as far as getting knocked down to lower health, so I figured it was probably worth going for, just to kind of stay on the safe side there. Accidentally went for Drain Mind here, because for some reason I was looking at that and thinking, yeah, no, that's a Drain Life, which is the actual one I meant to pick up at this point. Because when you're overleveled, Drain Life can do a pretty solid chunk of damage while healing you almost fully in a lot of cases. So, either way, a pretty handy thing that we'll be using to give everything to suck over the course of the run, but at this point I ended up picking up the wrong one. Anyhow. Moving on to this whole thing here, we haven't quite moved on to spears yet. I'm planning to do that pretty soon right here. I think it was actually maybe about another 10 minutes into this when I started moving on to spears. Just because I wanted to take a step back here before going into the Zabos fight, just because I didn't want to potentially run into problems with his beefiness. I was fairly certain that we'd be fine, but, you know, always good to be safe. Always good to be safe. So went ahead and went for these extra stats here. Ninjas, as you probably will know by this point, are crazy overpowered. So yeah, should just be able to carve through everything, no problems whatsoever. I'm not actually sure why they felt it necessary to stack so many things onto the ninja there. It does seem like a few of the classes just got inordinately large amounts of tools at their disposal. Like I will say, their basic tools, you know, their climbing tools, their decoys, and everything else. That part's really cool. I don't know why they felt it necessary to kind of go the extra step and, you know, kind of give them their own little kind of diet summoning abilities and stuff like that. Because they always seem to be in that little window where it either did nothing or they did way too much. So I'm not really sure why they put them in there in the first place, to be honest. It's like, I would assume the way that it probably went is they were going through, they were trying to find things to reference, and they probably thought, okay, you know, we want to go add in all those original moves from way back in the March of the Black Queen days. And, I mean, they kind of did, except then they added a crapload more, and then they added 2 tiers of them, and it's like, but why? Why is all that there? Just give them the basic casting abilities they had in the Snes version. Oh well. I mean, generally, their mindset seemed to be to just kind of take everything up to 11 and hope it worked out. So, for the most part, it did. Like, I will say, something that really should be always brought up for this game. It's like, how friggin' huge is this thing? You know? It's like, easily you can have runs going up to like 600-700 hours if you're going to, you know, at least try to do most of the stuff in there. And even then, like, hell, like, I've been playing this crap for like a decade now, and still find something new every time. How is that even possible? Not to mention, as far as bugs go, like, it's been mentioned before, but man, how is it that something this long has only 3 relatively minor bugs that anyone knows about and almost never runs into? It's like, there's that one, there's like a crash softlock kind of thing that Mr. Foles ran into a few times during his 100% run. There's a way that you can potentially screw yourself out of getting the gem book your first time around. But aside from that, and those are just rare, those are surprisingly rare. Yeah, aside from that, hell, there's almost no bugs to this thing. Yeah, there's some balance issues, but even then, you probably will never see those your first time around. In most cases. I will say I ended up seeing this game kind of broken in half my first run through. Just because, well, I was kind of curious to see where everything would go, and one of the things when playing through KO a whole lot grown up was that I could never get enough of the crossbows. That always kind of bugged me that, you know, here's, you know, these cool crossbows and everything else, they have this little window where they're pretty alright, and then they're kind of just meh for most of the rest of the game there. Like, they're decent, they're just never fantastic, the composite crossbows in particular. And yeah, like, they'll be reliable. They're as strong as most of the other kind of endgame basic weapons, but I always wanted to see more out of them, so I had a main character running heavy crossbows throughout the entire run. I could never understand why when swapping between classes, you know, some of the crossbows went down, sometimes they could use both hands, sometimes they could only use one. I didn't understand it whatsoever. But what I did know is by the end of it, I basically had Denim as this crossbow archer. I was like going around one-shotting everything. I had, I think, like 3 rune fencers in the team with spears that couldn't do jack to anything. Ended up, the sword users were kind of okay, the hammer users were doing fantastic. Didn't end up using ninjas that much, because I figured with so much stuff flying around, you know, after KOL, I figured clearly they just must not, you know, they must be relatively weak in this one too, so ended up not using them very much. Probably should have, especially after I started seeing all the, like, Naruto stuff popping out of them. I was like, hard pass, not a fan. I don't know. It's not that I necessarily have anything against that kind of stuff in particular. It's just, it's not for me. You know, just like as soon as you start seeing all the weird quotes and everything else, like, yeah, no thanks. I don't know if anyone else had that same feeling on their first time through. I mean, it's kind of an unusual thing, but you know, I guess everybody's got their own tastes in all this different kind of stuff. Anyhow, so moving on here. So yeah, the whole double knife thing, kind of impractical in this case, just because we're essentially giving up the one major advantage. Well, I guess there's many major advantages of the knife, but essentially being able to hit once and then almost immediately get another turn is kind of their intended go-to amazingness. You're not supposed to be able to be ridiculously overpowered with them, but yeah, they're pretty handy in that regard. So yeah, honestly, double knives, not very good in this one. Pretty darn handy in OV, I gotta say. Like, probably Claw and Knife is one of my favorite builds for OV, just because you get, like, Poison and Bind at the same time, potentially. You can get Poison, Bind, and Sleep. It's like, dang, that's perhaps gonna be pretty devastating right there, even if they can't take a hit too well. Anyhow, for some reason I still went all in on the double knives. I think I was trying to see if I could get past the level barrier at that point. It's somewhat handy in Farampa, though, like, especially if you're into a Griffin or something like that. But alright, so they're just going to go ahead and keep on marching on here, doing their whole thing, coming in, getting all blendered as you do. Again, we'll be getting to spears. Once we get to spears, stuff will get a little bit more interesting. Right now, it's literally just, like, run up and shank everything in the game. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of what you'd expect from a solo run, really. It's just one guy. They've only got so many actions. And I will say the system in this game is absolutely fantastic for a solo run, especially after doing one for, like, FFT and all that other stuff. It's just, it feels fantastic. Just that little extra move, you know? Alright. So that little flappy boy is just going to keep going up and down. This map is pretty annoying if you have a relatively slow character, especially on a solo run. Just because, yeah, there's a good number of maps where there's stuff like that, where they're just going to go and run and hide in their little hidey holes and whatever else. A bit frustrating. And there we go. There's that shackle that gets to be a little bit of a problem as time goes on. Due to the fact that his turns come relatively quick, and especially once he starts going faster down the line, you especially notice, like, towards the end of the game, I don't know whether it's a stat difference or what, but you start noticing debuffs like that fall off a lot faster most of the time. But when they don't fall off, oh man, do you notice? Like, there were, I want to say like 4 or 5 times when it was literally just like somebody nailed a 25% Petrify, and that was it. Just, like, no friggin' 600-something health, you know, full heavy gear and everything. It didn't matter. Just completely ruined within a few turns, as they just sit there, just getting bashed over and over and over. I think it mostly just rolls about 1 to 5 turns, give or take, depending on what the debuff is. Some of them end up lasting an inordinately long amount of time. So what I'm going for here was mostly claws. I remembered that I would need some claws for some, for some potential crafting stuff in the line, and figured, what the hell, I might as well pick up a few of them while I'm here, trying to get some extra levels on this class anyway. I can basically just carve through this stuff, no problem. And, you know, going for the double knives anyhow, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue. As you can see, they can still hurt. They can still hurt pretty decently. Yes, they're leveled up at the same level, but, you know, still can potentially be scary. And if I recall correctly, yeah, very first bag gets a claw right there. I think I was looking for the claw for the Vit +1, if I recall correctly. I forget which one exactly does what. I usually just collect a pile of them and hope for the best. Honestly, the crafting system's a bit of a mess. as we saw last time, and as we'll see plenty of later with the... I think I ultimately needed about 200 orbs to get through all of the extra dungeons and everything. That sounds like it just involves lots of sitting and spamming, but surprisingly, that was using them sparingly. And it mostly was for situations where exorcism just wasn't quite enough. If you didn't know, the radiant orbs actually work the same way as well, the high level light moves and all that kind of thing. So they'll exercise anything they end up hitting, or rather, they'll end up exercising anything that's already on the ground. They won't necessarily exercise it if they knock it down. But you can also pick up a bunch of Starfalls from Palace of the Dead for the same thing. Which, funny thing, it's actually cheaper to just friggin' buy all of the books for Draconology and all that kind of thing than it is to just try and use gems for everything. It's kind of messed up. Like, it's literally more practical to just never equip it as a skill. Because you end up needing... Okay, so gems are, I think it was like 200 or 300. Let's say 200. Err on the low side there. Because usually I just end up using whatever is collected over the course of a run. Anyhow, so you end up needing about 3 to 4, up to 8 in some cases, for the sake of using any of their abilities there. You can only carry up to a maximum of 99. So you're still spending roughly, roughly about anywhere from 6 to 1600 per move, and you're limited to that cap of 99 of them. So you're basically going to have a few fights where you can use those abilities, plus you got to wait for the MP to recharge to use them. And it's like, okay, that's, I mean, I guess that's fine. That's a really weird limit to have, but okay. And so, anyway, if you end up just getting the books for most of the abilities, like, granted, higher level stuff you can't really mass produce, but when you go to get the books, they're about 12 to 1600 each. So you're already not terribly far off as far as the price goes. But then you can just, get 99 of those books, and you already can get way more casts out of it doing it that way than just going and using the gems, which is, again, just a bit bass backwards, as it were. But, oh well. So I was considering using the ninja moves there. Didn't end up collecting a whole bunch of them. But I did need Judgments and Spirit Surges and all that kind of thing, because there will be occasional cases where some casting is needed. Exorcisms will be needed. I just figured I might as well start collecting them now, because once we get to Chapter 4, it is... well, originally I planned to do Palace of the Dead in Chapter 4. Man, I should have done it in Chapter 4. It's a little bit of a long story. We'll see when we get there, but oh my goodness. What a crap show. Can't believe I had to go through Palace of the Dead twice. I thought I had it all routed out perfectly, and then I forgot that it required one particular condition on the ending in order to trigger the 3rd chapter of Coda, despite the fact that it's really not necessary, but whatever. Like, if you didn't know, for Chapter 3 of Coda, it's literally a case where you only need Cashwa to have survived the ending, despite the fact that she's been in the story, and despite the fact that everyone's talking about her coronation and everything else for the rest of Coda. So it just automatically assumes you already have that ending. But for the purposes of Coda 3, they went back and thought, it's big brain time right now. She was the one that put in this policy that put lands in a little bit of a nursing home type situation here. And they're visiting that nursing home, and that's when they decided to go back in time to try to save him. It's like, okay. So he was already in that wheelchair. They could have gone back there at any point. Her putting that policy in there does not necessarily mean, that they wouldn't have, they would suddenly have the ability to go back in time. They already did that. They already have established that they can just do that now for some reason. And yeah. She was already mentioned and already assumed to be part of the ending before that point. But it's only that particular scene that won't trigger if you don't end up having her survive the ending. So, for example, what I ended up doing here is that I ended up saving her the first time, then went back for the Lord Marks, and then went to Coda, came back, saved her again, figured, okay, it should be fine now. Ended up going back through friggin' through most of the end game multiple times. Like, but this was supposed to have counted, I don't understand. And so I go and I read up more on it, because, it's a total fustercluck with some of the requirements. It's like, oh yeah, if you ended up allowing her to die in your original ending, you basically have to go back to that point, redo everything up to that point, including all of Coda, including all of Palace of the Dead, etc., etc. So, have yourself a good time. And, so you do. So we went back for more store stuff here. Basically just going to do more selling, going to do more supplying, because I really expected to have more need of more supplies up to this point. I was kind of worried that I wasn't getting some of the stuff I was looking for. And this this is when stuff started to change. Started looking at those spears. Started thinking, man, that could be interesting. That could be fun times. And so, ultimately ended up going for those. Ended up picking up a bunch of different varieties of them and all that kind of thing. and yeah, honestly, it's one of those things where it could have been potentially more impressive to do so with cudgels. Funny part is, cudgels are one of the other ones that have a multi-hit move that's kind of ridiculously strong. So could have potentially gone with that one. But yeah, ultimately I just had an excuse to use spears, so screw it, we're going with spears. So started picking up all that, decided to go do a big old collection of parts along the way. Funnily enough, between all of those craftables available at the moment, the Volge +1 is usually the one that I end up using more than most of the other ones, just because it is surprisingly useful. As you may have potentially noticed, some of the earlier crafting options right there are some of the ones that end up becoming weirdly strong later in the game. Like, for example, right there with the, well, we're going to get to it. Man, my brain just completely shut off there for a moment, but yeah, looking through all the spears there. The first few spears don't really give you much of anything too special, but then you end up getting the Volge, which ends up giving you Breach as well as a pretty decent chunk of bonus damage. Boulders are right for anti-zombies and that kind of thing. And then, really from there, from those two, you're better off just jumping straight up to an elemental option. I ended up going between the other ones, kind of depending on how stuff went. Like the Scorpion +1's probably one of my favorites, just because that you can get poison all over the dang place. Unfortunately, the attack bonus on that one is pretty sucky compared to the Trident. So ended up sticking with that for a while, and then wanted to go for literally any 2-tile spear. But then realized the only option for doing so was the dang Cursed Spear, which, can potentially be the strongest thing in the game. You can get its attack all the way up to 255, but, well, I wasn't about to go do that, quite frankly. I wasn't about to go max out another character. It is a solo run after all, and I wasn't about to, go step in at the very last minute and say, hey, let's just go ahead and max out another character just for the hell of it. Wasn't really worth it. So it ultimately ended up being more of a joke kind of thing. Went with 1 HKs for a couple of fights here just to, just kind of because I was considering whether or not it would be an idea to maybe work them in, because they're also pretty overpowered. But then figured, you know what, that'd be boring. So ultimately ended up not doing it. It's like one of the funny part is about 1 HKs. If you're doing a casual run, with a normal party and everything else, they're going to be really, really strong. Like, you're going to be noticing that character running around, slicing everything apart. In a solo, honestly, they're not as impressive, as weird as that sounds. Like, they still do a decent amount, but it's kind of overkill. It's not really something that something else can't do better, necessarily. Just because they're still not the lightest things in the world, so ultimately Daggers ended up being a bit more useful of a situation here. And yeah, I had a little bit of a minor pause here, as you do. I think I had to go step away for just a second. End up seeing that every now and then. And as time goes on, you'll end up seeing longer parts chopped up in weirder and weirder ways. I apologize for that. As you're probably well aware, this game is an absolute beast to get through in terms of its full ending and everything. So yeah, a little bit of an adventure sometimes. But yeah, as you can see here, they're doing 140s right out the gate. They're not even at rank 8 yet, so they're chopping through stuff with no real problem. The damage ends up going pretty well. They end up having a pretty decent amount of interesting stats and stuff assigned to them. But just, I don't know, ultimately, I would just prefer Daggers, to be honest. Even if they don't have as much raw damage, it's just... honestly, I would just rather take that second turn, and would much rather just go Dagger and Shield, especially for this kind of scenario. Like, if you have a normal one, they're just having them running around, like, let's say, just a suit of just basic armor, maybe no helmet or whatever else, maybe just a ring of bit or something like that, 2 swords and then steel stance, like, yeah, that'll be overpowered as hell. Nobody's gonna ever attack them, and they can just run around chainsawing through stuff. And in this particular scenario, it's not necessarily worth it. See, the thing is, Steel Stance is really good as a deterrent. As an actual defensive move, it's not terribly amazing. It increases defense by about 50%, which may not necessarily be enough to stop an entire team. So it's not like as good as a Phalanx or anything. It's kind of a diet version of it. Okay, so hello once again. New session here, since I have to do this in chunks due to weird scheduling shenanigans and all that kind of thing. It's alright, yeah, it seems we're still on the 1 HK portion here. I believe this actually might have been the last one with the 1 HKs. I didn't end up sticking to them too long, just because it would have been an entirely new skill to do, and, you know, kind of once their extra damage started dropping off, figured it really wasn't worth the extra points. I mean, you can pretty much tell here, we're getting up there as far as stats go, but it's getting to the point where it doesn't really make sense to try and squeeze those couple extra levels out of a transfer there, out of a class transfer, that is. So, you know, I was kind of touching upon this earlier and kind of just kept having it on my brain recently. But as far as the different ways that classes and kind of advanced classes and stuff like that got handled in the three kind of mainline Tactics Ogre versions, which, I mean, yeah, there were differences, like, for example, the Japanese version and the US version of the PSP one. That was mostly just a single number change for the most part, as well as a few little AI tweaks that were, honestly, after going back and forth on it mentally, and actually, I should probably note to go back and test the multiplayer, because I'm kind of curious to see if a lot of other abilities might have been more, I guess, available to the AI in multiplayer. I'll have to remember to test that. Anyway, but as far as the differences between those versions, it's kind of interesting how they handled the classes differently, because obviously the mentality was always there of like, okay, we want to let people do the RPG thing, we want to let them get strong as hell, but we still want to leave it, you know, challenging enough that it feels real for the most part. And I was having a conversation recently that I think might have come off a little bit opinionated on it, but in terms of exactly what it was that made me like KOL so much, because the thing was, every one of them has that same approach. They have the same general goals, and I'm not sure if they actually have them on a board somewhere of, you know, like, this is our exact feeling that we're going for. But in terms of locking things away just right, it's just the way the KOL did it really just did it for me. So let me explain. So first of all, the Snes approach was basically you end up getting classes as you go along with some minor requirements in the background. So, for example, say you have a priest, they need to not have a certain amount of kills, or you want a Terror Knight, they have to have 25 of them, as unrealistic as that is for such a crappy class. Which I guess, all things considered, after, you know, if somebody manages to survive getting 25 kills in that game, I guess by that point it would make sense that they would just have that debuff passively, which, interestingly, again, is a thing that KOL did. They didn't have the Terror Knight at all. They basically just added that that if one character got 25 kills, they just suddenly got the Terror Knight's passive buff on them at all times, which was just such a cool way of doing it. Anyway, again, besides the point. So okay. You know, they had some minor requirements, like, for example, you wouldn't end up getting a Dragoon unless you ended up going neutral most of the time. Actually, I don't even know if there was a way to get it on other routes. Honestly, I have not played the SNES version as much, so there are many things that I'm a little bit foggy on with it. But, you know, again, it was the earliest part in the series, so it's understandable that some stuff was off. Like, let's say early on, you end up getting a lot of that situation where you're doing 1 damage or whatever else. But as far as your classes go, you get them over time, mostly from your stats. Sometimes they'll have a secondary requirement, which alright, fair enough. You know, it's a neat way of doing it. They, as Matsuno himself, actually I think it was Matsuno. It was either Matsuno or the other director guy that was in the that recent interview I kept posting everywhere. But one of them was basically saying, like, man, when it came to SNES, like, we gave that thing everything. That was the best thing we could have accomplished with the technology at the time, and we had to invent new stuff to make it even happen. Which, like, looking at it mechanically, yeah, absolutely. You know, pulling that kind of miracle out of the SNES is really something else. Like, especially considering how many times they use custom animations that they never use again. Like, they went above and beyond for that one. Like, okay. You know, like, how they have that little bowing animation right after the first fight in Rhyme? Somebody specifically had to go and make that. Like, the time when they have Diebold take his helmet off. Somebody had to make that. Like, it was not easy for them to just go and slap all this extra stuff together. They put all kinds of extra work in all over the place. So yeah. Absolutely. They did the best that they could with everything there. So, you know, with you know, maybe adding some extra spice to unlocking some of the classes. I can absolutely understand that they, you know, might have gotten a little bit overwhelmed, which again happened with the PSP remake too, but I'll get to that. So, you know, you end up getting most of your basic classes, and then after everyone gets 1 or 2 class changes, it's just kind of like, that's kind of it. Like, you can raise people up as different classes, you go through your different paths and everything. And so, you know, you get your little build variety, though I will say I'm surprised that given that it's such a core mechanic, you know, to build everybody up as these different jobs and everything, it's amazing they don't specifically mention it. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I've recently been going through all 3, and I've been specifically trying to find where exactly any of that might be mentioned, and it just sort of happens. You know, it's just off in the background. But okay, back to my original point though. They originally tried to lock out advanced classes, like to prevent the thing from somebody going to the store saying, okay, you know, I want like a level 20 guy now, and to prevent somebody from just going and buying some hyper-advanced unit from the store, you had to go and train them from level 1. So it wasn't the most ideal way of doing it. It is certainly a way of doing it. Again, it was just a little bit grindy, and unfortunately none of the mods that I've actually seen out there have fixed that problem. Their way around that was that you could go and recruit units out in the field, which was, again, a cool way of doing it. Its success rate was just high enough that it was usually about a 50-50 once somebody went to low health and all that, so it felt really cool. You know, it was a nice way of doing it. You could do a permadeath run without running out of units. You know, you could pull stuff off. It was nice. It was nice. A little bit janky at times because of those little level limitations and because of how important levels were, but understandable. You know, definitely for the time and for everything that they pulled off, it's absolutely understandable that wasn't completely fine-tuned. Anyway, so taking a look at the remake, then they decided, okay, so we specifically want to hide away, you know, certain classes until a certain point of the game, and now just anybody can be that class. They can just start at that class from level 1, all good. Which, alright. I mean, again, it's an interesting way of doing it. I wish that they had maybe done a little bit more with that particular idea, though. Because the way that it winds up, you have your first 5 classes, by which point people usually realize, like, wow, these archers are really, really good. But then from there, you know, you kind of just get that slow trickle as time goes on, and in many cases don't even realize that you got those new classes. Like, if you're routing a new run, you might notice those things a lot more. But I'm sure I wasn't the only one that, while going through the game initially, just wound up sticking to those first 5 for the most part. With exception to knights, just because I always wanted to have knights in the group. But typically I did the whole kind of Noah's Ark kind of approach, where I just had 2 of everything. At least 2 of the classes that I liked. With exception to Swordmasters. For some reason I always have only 1 of those, and I'm not sure why. They just kind of feel like a class that needs to be a loner. Besides the point, though. So you just wound up getting a whole bunch of different classes, and if you ended up keeping somebody as one particular class instead of cross-classing them, you usually ended up getting punished for it, because by the time, like, it would get you through the main game, but then by the time you tried to get into post-game, suddenly they're saying, okay, look, we expected people to kind of optimize their teams by this point, what the hell are you doing? And unfortunately, by that point, you've usually gotten so many levels in most of your basic classes that if you don't know about the mechanic, you're not going anywhere, and a lot of people wound up in that trap, which, again, it got people through the main game. Fair enough, I suppose. But here's the thing. Here's why I think that KOL did it absolutely best. Because they still had the same thing where everybody was locked to those 50 levels. You know, even if the game didn't scale up past like 20-ish, there was enough rubber banding that usually, you know, that team would still be fine. Yeah, they would kind of curb stomp the final boss once they got there, but surprisingly, even then, there were enough kind of things in place that it would still try to keep their damage down at least. But anyhow, so as that game goes on, though, like, yes, you get all your basic classes from your stats and everything else, but all of the advanced ones were hidden behind emblems, so that way they could go back. You could still hire units of a higher level, so they could keep up with everybody else, but at the same time, they couldn't immediately hop into those advanced classes because they needed to still accomplish certain things. So it was a nice mix of kind of both of those systems, and I'm a little bit surprised that they didn't try something like that for the PSP remake. By the way, rando fight here, another one that another class I'm just trying to train up here. Almost go down to a crit there. even after all of these stats and all of these upgrades and everything else, and even going back to trusty old Daggers at rank 8 there, still end up almost getting taken out by just a rando lizard. Thankfully, these lizards aren't as strong as they were in the Snes version, but yeah, this is why you kind of want to go in with armor. With this, these high stats at this point on this guy, that armor would have pretty much been enough to kind of push them over the edge in terms of staying alive. I figured he had enough defense in place that he wouldn't really have to worry about it, but unfortunately I was a bit wrong on that one. So, it's at this point that spears finally started. At long last. This is what, like, friggin' 3 hours into the run, finally we get to the start of what'll end up being the final build. As weird as it sounds, it still doesn't end up taking the majority of the rest of the run, just because daggers are so freaking practical. Quick little coffee break, because of course, gotta have some juices there. Still only doing 30s. Like, it's not impressive damage at all. There's pretty much no bonus damage on this initial spear. It's a real disappointment. Why is that bronze spear so dang disappointing? And the answer is because they actually changed one of the mechanics with it. The actual only difference between this one and the other spears in the series is that instead of doing high damage, low damage between the two hits, as in the first one does a whole bunch, the second one does scratch damage, they instead just kind of put the medium between the two, presumably to make it easier on them mechanically. There's a lot of bits in this game where it seems like they kind of worked something in from the back end, and I believe I was touching on that earlier in the first half hour of this whole thing. But for example, that was one of them. They couldn't do the passive Terror Knight buff without presumably including all kinds of new systems for it, so they ended up just making it Lament of the Dead instead. They couldn't really come up with two different hit effects on the same hit, so they just kind of made the spear uniform, which unfortunately I believe might be part of the reason that it ended up having such low power, because they might have they essentially might have just looked at that whole thing and thought, okay, we gotta balance for 2 double hits, gotta find that nice happy medium, and it's just like strictly in that category of just subpar up until you can make it really good later. But oh well. It's understandable why they did it that way. Like, for example, the two-handers, they wanted to give them a nice, solid first hit, but then they got scared of how much damage you could do if they made the finishers not suck. So then you just basically get 4 finishers that are exactly the same thing with a different element. Not sure why that one is. That one will always kind of bug me, which it kind of makes me think that maybe they had something else in mind, but they just couldn't. They either couldn't quite get to it, maybe they couldn't quite get it working in time, or maybe they just figured, it's a two-hander, the whole thing is just swinging. Maybe they just wanted somebody to stick to one particular element and, just kind of have that be it, maybe? I'd like to hear some theories on that one. What do you guys think happened with the two-handers? Because, Hammers got a whole bunch of interesting finishing moves. They wound up being better than two-handers in every single possible category. I'm pretty sure... Let's see. Is there any class that can use two-handers that can't also use hammers? Because I'm pretty sure they can all use hammers. So it's just a straight upgrade, and... like, literally with only 2 exceptions. The Ogre Blade's pretty alright, and the Dark Headsman's pretty alright for Terror Knight, but even still, it's such a long road to make 2 H's viable, at least viable for Terror Knights and stuff like that. On Warriors and all that, they're fine. Like, I feel like they're kind of there as almost the diversity higher of the weapon pool. Like, they just kind of felt that, maybe there were certain weapons that you wouldn't want to go grind out a second one, or maybe you're doing a no grinding run or a no chariot run or something else, and you just didn't want to go through that extra effort of picking up a second hammer or something like that, or you just wanted some different flavor. I don't know. Would be interesting to find out, but I don't think we ever will. As the saying goes, most of the time, whenever there's creators that are 10 months out from whatever their last project is, they usually already hate it. So I kind of wonder if there was a new interview recently. Like, I think that, let's see, that interview was mostly about the FF14 MMO thing. I don't remember if they specifically mentioned this game by name in there. Then again, they might have legally not been allowed to, because they had to get a certain amount of shill going for their project. By the way, on a bit of a side note, I just want to point out, every other class, casters are mostly just bouncing off. Fencers are just so bad with stats that they're just getting nothing here. One quick pause. Alrighty, and back. So yeah, had to take a little bit of a pause there, as you do. Now, you might be able to tell, the Rune Fencer, despite being a really cool class, honestly, as far as the vanilla classes go, despite its overall statistical iffiness, this is still one of my favorites. Like, just because it's one of only 2 spear classes in the game, which, you know, kind of amazing oversight on that one. Well, okay, I should say 2 basic spear classes in the game. The funny part is your most viable spear units are just the ones that have an extra class so they can do a little bit more with it. So, for example, Denim, Murden, and Gildus. Actually, I believe, I forget if Hamilton's able to use it. I believe Hamilton does get spears. I don't remember if that's a OV thing or if that's a vanilla thing. It would make sense for him to be able to use it, I suppose. It's, again, kind of a weird thing, because it's like, okay, here, I just got this character in the, like, hell, it's not even the 11th hour, it's like 11:59 in the game at that point. But he's like the most 11th character, or 11th hour character you're gonna get in this game. They're like, yeah, here's a bunch of skills you're never gonna use on this guy. How would you like to start them from scratch? And yeah, two-handers are also amazingly on that list. Funny part is, I'm pretty sure he can't even use the best two-handers, so that's neato. He can't even use the Ogre Blade, as I recall, just because it's Dark Element and he's a Paladin. Same thing goes for Lord. I'm pretty sure the Lord can't use the Ogre Blade. Actually, I think the Terror Knight might be the only one that can use it. Don't quote me on that, though. I literally never bother with that stupid thing. It's just, it's such a weird way, a weirdly long way to get a gimmick weapon. And you might be thinking, like, okay, you know, strongest hitting thing in the game. Kind of. Like, yeah, if you get the entire set, you get the strength bonus, and that's all well and nifty-like, but again, at the same time, you could have just gotten the same damage out of a hammer for the most part. Or could have just gone for the Jiggler set and just kind of gotten that same damage from about 3 miles away. So, it's definitely in that pile of not worth it. And for some reason, its main special move is Body Snatch instead of anything else. Which I feel like they probably could have put on, well, a hell of a lot of other things. Just maybe other stuff that would have made a little bit more sense. Because its whole role throughout the series has always been, like, that one super hard-hitting mega weapon kind of thing. Same thing with the Snapdragons. It's kind of weird that they went from, you know, like, ultimate weapon of ultimate amazingness, from literally almost anything being shoved into it, to suddenly being astoundingly terrible unless you completely max out a character, feed it to them, and then it becomes the best weapon in the game. Seems odd. Seems odd. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. It's also kind of that whole limitation that your base stats can't go above 100, so you can't pull some of the shenanigans you could pull in other games and all that kind of thing. Anyway, so yeah, its main gimmick is just, even though it is still a very hard-hitting thing, you're supposed to be able to use it to get skills onto classes that should otherwise not be able to get them. For example, turn Buck and what am I saying? Turn Buck. Wow. Turn Canopus into a Buccaneer, and yeah, the whole pistol and sword gimmick, despite the fact that he's one of the only ones that can potentially make use of that skill setup out of the box. Wow. Sound like I'm half in the bag today. Anyway, so despite the fact that he's one of the only ones with the numbers to make that work, instead they decided that you have to essentially go teach Fusils to a Fusilier, then you basically allow that Fusilier to die, then you essentially allow it to get Body Snatched by a Birdman, who then takes the Fusil skill along with him. Wait a minute, got that completely backwards. You have them equip their Fusil skill, you essentially have them Body Snatch into a Birdman, you allow that Birdman to die 3 times, at which point you essentially transfer that skill over to Canopus. So essentially it's 2 deaths and 1 very, very difficult... is it fair to call it very, very difficult in the context of this game? Okay, annoyingly difficult, but still potentially on the route if you're going for the Lands ending. Weapon to get. There we go. Just because it's sometimes dropped by Roderick. I think it's like a 25% drop from Roderick. The other ones being the 3 Coda guides and a fork most of the time. And I think sometimes you can just get a Platinum Elbereth if the game just feels like giving you the finger that day, as it loves to do with its drops. Man, I don't know why they went to that drop system. They really played too many MMOs that year, I feel. But, oh well, it is what it is. So, So yeah, you go through all that effort in order to get one of the worst weapon types in the game onto Canopus. Neat. Basically allowing you to potentially get him... Well, I think he can still use the cursed gun as a Barton. I'm pretty sure everybody that can use a pistol can use the cursed gun. It would be real dumb if he couldn't. But then again, you know, weird limitations all over the place. Though that being said, I suppose the one of the runs that I still want to do for vanilla is to just do cleric only. Just to kind of see how insane that would be. And by insane, I mostly mean incredibly dull, but we'll see. We'll see. That's one I never actually tested off screen yet, so it's worth doing. Probably, maybe. It really might not be. So okay, back to the whole rune fancy situation here. Start getting all of the +1 gear as you do. Start getting a few more stats and all that kind of thing. Alright, now the whole crafting portion. Gotta love all the extra crafting portions. And there we go, the Volish +1. Probably, I already mentioned this last time, it's almost definitely my favorite of the early craftables. I don't know, it's just something about the spears actually getting something worthwhile. Though it's kind of funny though, both two-handers and spears get picked on pretty hard by this game, and yet still we wind up with a situation where they end up getting two of the most useful early game craftables. Almost makes me wonder if they meant to do more things with them. Like, with spears, you get those little kind of glimmers of hope as time goes on. It's like, maybe they'll make it not suck, and that kind of thing. And, you know, ultimately they do kind of, sort of make it not suck. It just takes a minute to get there. This is when we run into one of those awkward little early bits where you gotta go get leather for some of the craftables, like the Zeiston, and, you know, I could understand all the gloves and everything. I will point out, the Zeiston is one of the weirdest ones that they reference / misname in this game. I'm not really sure why they call it the Zeiston, because the thing there is, like, hell, I could understand with the Viking sword and all that, they probably meant barbarian sword. The Zeiston, historically speaking, was like a super friggin' long spear with 2 heads on it. And in this one, it's a small spear that's all slender and all that. It's like, okay, it's made of bronze, they got that part right. But aside from that, yeah, no, it's supposed to be like a long 2-handed spear because it was a light cavalry spear. Essentially, one end broke off, they had the other. But yeah, if you ever want to see what one of those looks like, but you don't feel like using Google for whatever reason, just like look at the one picture that always comes up for Alexander the Great. That was like his weapon. Anyway, moving the hell along. More stabby type situations going on here. There we go. They're doing their PPUs. Archers are doing damage as they do at this point because of the +1s. Should be 9 into everything. It's actually a little bit funny that they'll always go for Paralytic Wave even when there's no reason for them to do so. Yeah, literally 0% chance. Now, sometimes you can tell that this is a mercy feature, like especially later in the game when you get stuff like Stop Proof and whatever else. If they always avoided the stuff that you were immune to, if they did, you know, just kind of an attack check on everything that they did, I would assume the game would probably lag too much just because of how many layers they have in the thing entirely. Because essentially they have all the ground tiles that would be affected by everything. They have the equipment of each of the units. They would have to have what everything is, what everything, you know, specifically blocks, what, for example, the actual damage calculations would be, all of the augments, all of the additions, everything else. Like, I would assume once all said and done, it would just slow the game down. It does seem like one of those things that would change it. Then again, you know, maybe I'm just kind of talking out of my rear here, but I would assume that's probably why that's not there. Because it just would be one extra check, and, well, hell, it's amazing that the game runs as smoothly as it does. That is to say, silky and buttery as all hell. Like, I just want to take a second, because my god does this thing run pretty. Like, even well, I mean, that is to say, on original hardware and stuff that it was, you know, at least partially optimized to run on. I will say on emulators, it really does not want to run a lot of the time, especially on lower-end emulators, and especially on weather maps and things like that. Like, this computer's pretty beefy. It's a pretty decent desktop. And still, it has problems with the overhead maps sometimes. It's not always, but it's just kind of there. Any darn ways. So as you can see, we're already doing above 100 with this thing, because after you get out of the bronze era there, you start doing some pretty nice hefty hurt, because all of our damage comes from that bonus, and so far all of it is coming through. Not really sure why I went for a finisher there, but why not? Sometimes you gotta feel stylish, you know? Collect a bunch more loot, collect a bunch more levels, and did I end up checking what level we've actually gotten to at this point? No. I think I was just going for the Zeiston. And if I recall correctly, I ended up sticking to this class for quite a while so that we could get those spears up. And I was really glad, like, in the very end of this whole thing, I was really glad that I ended up doing it right now. Which I'll probably end up going and disagreeing with myself later on for one reason or another. I tend to do that, but I will say at this point, looking back on it, I'm really glad I did it at this point. Because, man, it would have been a real pain later on down the line. Especially when I started trying to go break the level barrier and all that kind of thing. Which was minorly successful, but not super handy. It's a weird mechanic to be there. I kind of wish they would have come up with a good narrative reason for stuff working the way it does. I know it really doesn't matter to most folks, like hell. It's one of the reasons that I don't really like playing Disgaea. I love that game. The very first time I played through it, it was one of my favorites. Every repeated playthrough, it would not mentally click with me at all. Like, I specifically started with Disgaea 2, and like, I love the ideas behind that game. But the fact that there's no logical explanation to why any of the class changes work the way they do or anything like that, I don't know, it bugs me more than it should. I know that's a very personal thing, but it's just, I don't know, it just kind of bugs me. Also, sorry for the horrible squeaking, apparently my chair has become rusty. How about that? Yeah, previous chair snapped in half, by the way. I forget if I ever mentioned that. Ended up just picking up a metal kitchen chair, and apparently this thing has decided to go all Silent Hill on me here. Well, dang. Why must all my chairs break? Huh. Don't even need that much of a diet, dang it. Actually, all things considered, there was a discussion earlier over what's allowed to count as overweight or not. Because funny thing is, like, technically I'm kind of chubby, but at the same time I'm also pretty dang fast when moving around. So I've been told several times, like, you know, not technically, like, well, I guess the question was what is allowed to count as overweight in that case? Because, like I mentioned, that is really distracting. Hang on, I gotta fix that. Alrighty, and I managed to fix it. Okay, so, discussion on overweightness. So, obviously, that's something that's relatively subjective, but it's one of these weird cases of what I've been repeatedly told was just called dad bod, where it's like, at one point you used to work out a fair bit, and then you kind of let yourself go and or traveled way too much. And then after that, you know, just wound up sort of getting back into things again. So, like, for example, whenever anybody needs anything lifted or moved or whatever else, I'm usually one of the first ones called to the group. And then, you know, whenever somebody needs somebody to run around and do stuff, I'm usually pretty dang good at running around and doing stuff. But yeah. As far as being actually skinny, no. Although, weirdly enough, due to the fact that I'm pretty short, I still wind up being the one that ends up volunteering to get shoved into places if there's not enough car seats. Yeah, it's surprisingly uncomfortable to take a 3-hour car ride shoved between, like, kind of like shoved in the floor space of a car, like underneath a car seat. But dang it, got it done. Got it done. Ah, man, the things you do for large family gatherings. Anywho, back to the run, because we're getting completely off topic here. As you can see, the run is currently more of a snow plowing contest. We're essentially just running around all of this hill. It's a wonder why anybody keeps coming back here, to be honest. Hell, probably travel guides just mention all of the archer bodies just hanging out all over the place. Ah, man. See, but again, like I was saying earlier, I would love to have seen a logical explanation for all this. And, like, for example, in all of it, the main background idea is supposed to be, okay, these are all just marauding people doing whatever off in the background, just because they're all displaced by wars and whatever else, but why are they so consistent and organized and everything else? And yeah, there's never really a good explanation for it. It's just RPG stuff, I guess. So I kind of wish that there maybe would have been, I guess, an increased rarity of them. I really like the way that OB64 actually handled that particular aspect of the whole RPG thing, as you do. Where, yes, you could run into random fights if you go into a map and you're going to specific areas and you're running around there a lot, and then you just, like, run into one random unit traveling on the road, or, you know, you go to the mountain, like, okay, you see birdmen and random people traveling along the roads, or, you know, ferries or stuff like that, or you go into a forest and you find zombies, or you go to the mountains and you find a dragon. It's like, okay, this is cool, you know, they're just there, they're just hanging out. And yeah, if you need to do, like, training for your particular groups, you go and you pay a trainer, and then, you know, they send out a training squad, they do their whole fighting thing, they get a little bit of experience, and it's like, okay, cool. This is a nice way of limiting it, and that is, as far as I'm concerned, the absolute pinnacle of what the series achieved in terms of actual training balance. Like, it has never been done better in the entire series, and for that matter, I don't think I've seen a more... I don't want to say immersive, because there's some pretty awesome stuff out there, and I'm sure there's some I haven't seen, but in terms of explaining grinding while also keeping the world consistent, you know, while still allowing you to go explore and hire those random units, while still preventing you from, you know, I mean, there's technically nothing preventing you from repeatedly going and doing those fights for a really piddly amount of XP, and also kind of ruining your reputation in the process, which is, again, just a cool way of doing it. Because on the one hand, okay, you know, basically, people are starting to view you as a bad guy because you're just sending your army around the countryside just pillaging, basically. And okay, that makes sense. Narratively, the game's always judging you, and it's a cool way of doing it. So yeah, I don't know. I would love to hear some thoughts on that as well. Like, what would you say? Like, have you seen something like that done better in any other, you know, game or in the series or wherever else? Because I'd love to hear about it. Come to think of it, why the hell do I have a bow on this guy? I think this was just like one time I wanted to see how much a short bow would actually do. Whatever. This could have been done, like, literally I can just have him run to random fights with just fists at this point. Yeah, I think I was just curious to see how much a short bow would do, and/or was, yeah, I think I was just trying to see if this would get stuff done faster. Oh well. It doesn't count, dang it. It's not actually doing any of the real fights with a bow. I feel stupid for forgetting that when I was announcing that earlier. It's a mostly no-bow run. Nothing that counts, anyway. It's okay. You saw nothing. Here's a cookie. And at which point, you would probably be obligated to go get yourself a cookie. I don't actually have any on hand. I have an entire jar over there for the kiddos, but that's the kids' cookies, you know? Why are you coming over here and trying to take their cookies? That's just not nice. Alright, so that took a little bit of time. Like, obviously... oh, now I know I was doing it! Yeah. I was just going through from class to class, just to see how everybody did completely untrained with different things. Like right here, with all of these extra stats, all of this extra training, this guy's been through so many different classes, he's overpowered as hell, he's got all this extra stuff. How good do you think two-handers are going to be? Like, hell, he even has a title. This is Man of the Sword. Like, surely this guy's just gonna go in there and dominate, right? Well, here's the thing. They're not very good. Which is funny, because this is even one of the best ones you can, one of the better ones you can get in the early game. Like, yeah, short bows do 100 with almost no skill. That thing does 60. It's that bad. They're just not very good. But I was mentioning earlier, there's what I like to call the OSP run, which is probably one of my favorite strategy-type runs, but it's basically where you turn it into a roguelike, where you don't really get to use a store or anything. You just basically go through using only what you find and without any additional grinding. And yes, I know, roguelike title, those always have grinding, kind of, ignore that. I just mean that you kind of FTL it, basically. You're just always going forward. As far as I'm concerned, the ideal roguelike situation, even if technical definitions don't quite agree with me on that one. So yeah, the funny part is that, yeah, this thing has a pretty decent amount of bonuses on it, to the point where it's actually one of the stronger things you can get in the first couple chapters. In fact, it's even worth keeping a hold of the broadsword for quite a while, just due to the hefty strength bonus you get off it, but... even still, like, it's disappointing on the best of days. Like, this is just kind of sad when compared with everything else. Like, he's more or less doing the same kind of damage that he's... Yeah, same kind of damage right now as he would if he just didn't even have all those extra stats. He was just doing it normally. It's a real piece of crap. Oh well. Ooh, well. And yeah, the funny part is that some of the series' best known and scariest things were put into the same category as this. Like, for example, you got the Desert Blade. Then, you know, that thing was absolutely wrecking faces over in the original game. Like, it's one of your first intros as the three knights come in with their fancy swords. Like, man, this thing hits like a truck. Then you pick it up in this one, it's like, hey, this thing kind of hits like a rusty, non-functioning Buick. I don't know. It's like it'll bump you a little bit, I guess, but it's not. I mean, the friggin' engine's rusted off of it. It's not technically moving on its own accord. Kind of just awkwardly ram it into something. But oh well, oh well. And yeah, like Ogre Blade's all right. It's just kind of disappointing that you can't. Now that I think about it, maybe that's why the finishers suck so much. That they were worried about the Ogre Blade being overpowered. I mean, really, by that point, though, who cares by that point? And for that matter, you could go get a way stronger thing in terms of just maxing out a cursed weapon. It's like friggin' get a cursed dagger or something. Instead of going and getting some of its crazy finishers or a cursed crossbow or spear. Well, I ended up getting a cursed spear in this one. Ended up just using a generic rando from the store for it. It lasted a good long while, still did a decent amount of damage, even if its attack was only like 45, but whatever. It's fine. Actually, one thing that I keep wanting to remember to go check, there was one run that I was watching of a guy a while ago, and for whatever reason, in the post-game, they decided to go back to short swords on a lot of characters, and I don't know if there's some limiter challenge to that, because I don't think it actually said in the video. I don't even remember how I found that video now that I think about it. Anyhow, so next we go for another terrible build that you're never advised to use, which is Axes and Knights. Another one that I've actually recently gone and tested on a casual run I was doing, just to kind of see if I could make that build a bit more useful, and yeah, it's not. I mean, if you want to have an anti-knight knight, sure. If you want an anti-healer knight, rather. Like, Mr. Ledge is kind of okay for that. Other than that, it's really just meh. It's not necessarily the worst thing out there, but it sure feels like they're made of butter a lot of the time. Like, you can see right there, the axe, even though it's doing, well, pretty much the same as the two-hander, at least you're getting another hand out of it, it's still kind of meh. At least they're reasonably quick if I'm remembering the numbers correctly. There's so many numbers that you can oftentimes completely forget. Actually, speaking of completely forgetting things, cool little random bit of trivia. So recently was testing out this shall we say thing for the original PS1 version of Tactics Ogre, and yeah, there was a little thing I never realized that somebody pointed out. That for some reason, all of the axes in the game are two-handed except for the hand axe. The flanca, or the, why am I suddenly having a hard time remembering what it's called? Whatever, the flanca is what the game called it. But, Francisca, there we go, that's what it's supposed to be. But, anyway, so that thing is the only one-handed axe in the game, apparently. Never really thought about it, but, yeah, kind of odd. Also, probably part of the reason that they decided to include one-handed axes as their own thing once the remake came around. Probably one of those things that was just on the list of, like, here's a bunch of stuff that we want to have added in there. Now that I think about it, are there any spears besides the basic spear, alder, and then some of the elemental spears? Because I don't think there's actually anything in between, now that I think about it. Maybe that's why they added so many, but so many of them are so terrible. Because I would say the Volge is more or less where the spear actually started in the original game. Oop, sorry, didn't mean to accidentally smack that thing. Happens. But yeah, the Volge is more or less where they started. So, yeah, definitely a whole lot of going through Tynemouth here. As you can see, it's a place that I honestly don't understand how it's even still populated anymore. Sure, their plants are probably growing fantastically, and I'm pretty sure at this point most of Denham's strength here isn't actually coming from these fights, but from the fact that he has to friggin' go and dig so much ground as soon as he's done here, and or the stink must be scaring everything away. Then again, what would cockatrices be like the local equivalent of vultures in this case? Would they just sort of, like, pop in from Farampa and just go and yoink everything and fly away? Oh man, that sounds terrifying, actually. Just every time there's a fight, you just see, like, a crapload of cockatrices come in out of nowhere, just, like, petrify anybody that tried to get in their way. Just suddenly yoink everybody and run back off to the woods. I mean, I guess it kind of lines up with how they act in OB64. Now that I think about it, I think 64 is probably the one game in the series that thought more about how all of these creatures would logically behave more than any of the others. Like, the very first cockatrice team you run into, they're just camping a little wood line. In most cases, you probably wouldn't even go fight them, but then, like, if you try to go that direction, they just pop out of the woods and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, did 6 of your squads get suddenly turned to stone and die? Whoops. Shouldn't have gotten in the way of my feeding frenzy over here, I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's fascinating. Just, God, I love that game. I wish it was playable on a Vita. I know that's a weird complaint, and it's getting there at some point, but I swear, getting OB64 on a Vita is friggin' cursed. Because, okay, get this, right? There's actually a mod that allows you to play 64 games on a Vita. Alright, fair enough. So that would be Daedalus, if you're curious. It's D-A-D-A, or D-E-A-D-A-L-U-S. How you would usually spell Daedalus. Anywho, so, cool thing is, yeah, it'll run some 64 things. If you try to run OB64, it'll end up being completely and utterly broken, and then will crash. So, okay, fair enough. It is a mod for the PSP. Now, 2 things happened. First of all, there's RetroArch, which allows you to run a bunch of old things. Surprisingly, even up to running DOS on a friggin' PSP with customizable controls and everything. You know what it can't run? 64. Lots of things for the 64, but yeah, they can't be bothered to make it run. They've had several test versions out there. None of them actually have panned out into something playable for OB64 anyway, as of yet. And I was really excited to see, you know, some files that were labeled for an N64 little thing on there, but no such luck, unfortunately. So yeah, I was keeping an eye on Daedalus, and was really excited a few months ago because I'm going and checking on the forum there, and they're like, hey, look! Oh! Well, I mean, perfect timing on that. That was neat. But anyway, so out of nowhere, there's like, okay, look, we're picking up development again, we're making this whole thing work, we're thinking about porting it to the Vita, it has all this cool new stuff, here's all these new things people found for us, so we're absolutely gonna go and make it work. As I accidentally punch my desk, ow. So, yeah, it seemed cool. Seemed really cool. And then one of them has an issue. And then another one of them has an issue. And then they all run into financial issues. And then nobody else is doing the project. And then somebody's apparently going and trying to plagiarize stuff. And it's like, oh my god, why? Why can't it just work? So, unfortunately, yeah, to this day, as of like a week ago, I think it's kind of on unknown hold at this point, which is a bummer. I mean, one of these days it'll hopefully get there, but for the time being, what can you do? Now, if I recall correctly, this is the one where that one spear guy got absolutely douchey luck with his repeat 25s. There's one of them like that, where there was a fight that just almost immediately ended in a loss because they kept hitting 25s over and over, as they're surprisingly want to do a lot of the time. Yeah, I wasn't even bothering with the cudgel at this point. Unless you have a mace, it's just not really worth trying to hit anything. Oh, well, that is to say, unless you have a mace or you have one of the elemental stabs. Those are bizarrely strong. Couldn't tell you why. I would assume they probably wanted to see them as a caster hybrid weapon, maybe. But it's weird how strong they are. They're as strong as some of the endgame other melee weapons. Like I think legit at one point, stabs are actually stronger than two-handers. Which is just, it's a hilarious spit in the face for an already completely spit in the face category, but oh well. So, it's okay. Unfortunately, OB64 can't run on Vita, but you know what? So far, I've been testing the that Hammer to Fall mod for like a few weeks lately on Project 64. The one, it's the same one as PC, but they have an Android version. I have not run into a single issue. Which, by the way, crazy overstated character does 14 damage to a freaking wizard. Yeah, old man in a bathrobe doesn't even take damage from this stick. I don't really know what amazingly soft wood they make this thing out of, but wow. Just wow. Ah, delicious coffee. Alrighty, and away we freaking go. So it is at this point that I started thinking, wait a minute. There has to be somebody else with cudgels. And I believe I actually started trying to train cudgels with, oh yeah, I forgot to pick up the cudgel skill, that's what it was. But I started looking into maces at this point, which I have to say, like, maces kind of run into the same thing that a lot of the other niche weapon classes have, in which they have really sharp jumps in power, and they have some very interesting niche uses attached to them. Like, later on, I'll end up using the Damask Mace for a while, and honestly, honestly, that thing is awesome. Like, as weird as it is, that's probably one of the most, how do I even put it? One of the handier things from that whole category, and I could definitely see it being useful whenever we end up doing that cleric run. But just because of the kind of layout of bonuses that it ends up getting, it actually turns them into surprisingly good health leechers with Drain Heart. But that one also kind of caps off its damage fairly early, so I guess it would depend. I don't know. I feel. So I'm curious how many people have tried single class challenges on this game, because they have an interesting route. Like, they have an interesting situation that I don't think many games end up having. Like, especially, you know, stuff like FFT or the original game, not a Lotus, any of that. You pretty much never run into such a bizarre, bizarre difficulty curve. Because it literally just starts off insanely easy up until Chapter 3, at which point it's like, you can't do damage anymore. Because you inevitably hit that level wall if you stick to a single challenge. Or, stick to a single class. There we go. Probably the most... Yeah, probably the best way to actually handle potentially doing a single-class challenge of this whole thing would just be to have specific cheats set up for every chapter to make sure that you couldn't actually level past, I'd say, like 80% of the median of whatever that particular chapter would be. It seems like that would be a little bit too much effort, but it's the only way that you could, you know, get it similar to something like FFT or whatever. Where you specifically didn't steamroll the early game and then get steamrolled yourself in the late game. Now, the reason for this is because once you get to a certain level, obviously it switches over to New Game Plus. Everything has new equipment that you can't dream of getting a hold of without actually beating them. And the thing is, because you've stuck to only a single class, you're essentially put into a situation where you're going to have lower base stats than everybody on top of everything else. So suddenly you have zero advantages going for you whatsoever, except for maybe proficiency if you did everything just right. And it's those kinds of cases right there where, honestly, in many cases, you're kind of just completely SOL, unless you do something incredibly cheesy for several hours at a time, which, like, for example, I did a Rune Fencer only SCC ages ago, and really what it ended up turning into was a severe challenge for a couple fights right after Crit and Law there, at which point ran into a situation where I just had everybody with Scorpion plus 1s, and they ran into that fight with Apollinaire, who suddenly had endgame equipment. And man, wasn't great. Wasn't great at all, so I just kind of sat there for about 3 days bashing my head over that fight, until finally, sure enough, everything died of poison. Like, it's just, it just took forever. Definitely took forever. And then after that, ended up going to Reason Way to try to get Colcriomes, and that took about another week to actually get everybody Colcriomes, at which point I realized their damage was still pretty kind of meh. And so then we just kind of went to the end game, and that was that. Just kind of poked at a boss for absolutely ages using HP Infusion over and over. And that was kind of that. It was just basically insta-healing and beating the guy at pretty much 20 health or lower at a time. Wouldn't recommend it, honestly. But it definitely got me curious about two classes in particular that at least have a more potentially interesting route. So, Terror Knights, okay. Terror Knights can actually potentially overcome the level curve, just due to Lament of the Dead, as weird as that sounds. I was testing it a little bit about a week ago, give or take, and yeah, they can surprisingly pull it off. It's just that Fear puts down their stats just low enough that they can actually do okay damage if they're using hammers. So they could potentially do it, and then it might potentially be interesting with Clerics as well, just because they get that one weird finisher. And I'm thinking that mixed with Damask Maces and stuff like that could potentially lead to some interesting stuff. I don't know. I guess it would have to be seen. I probably would have to test that one before actually committing to a run of it, especially considering how ridiculously long it takes for me to get these out at this point. I apologize it's taken so long, by the way. This particular part was promised like 2 weeks ago now. I think it's been about that long, and like, literally every time that I'm hoping there will be a moment for me to continue, doing this whole commentary thing and whatever else, just something ends up coming up over and over and over, and just the windows for actually getting it done are so small. That's what she said. Anyhow, so so moving on here, as you can see, Mr. Vance's team isn't super amazing here. Just carving through them. He does have an interesting setup, so if you're on a challenge run or whatever else, this is one of those ones that's liable to give you a little bit of trouble, because he's got a good amount of healing, good amount of casting, a good amount of unusual debuffs and stuff like that, and he himself is actually a surprisingly decent hybrid build. Like, as you can tell, despite the fact that he's using a one-handed crossbow, he's still potentially as threatening as any other archer. So yeah, he's 3 levels behind, he's drastically behind in base stats, he can still pull off a pretty solid snipe. So yeah, Vance is one of those superpower characters that unfortunately never survives. No matter what route you go on, there's just no way for him to make it through the game. It's kind of a shame. Like, I wish that there were more cases where you could potentially, spare or dissuade or whatever else all these different characters. But at that point, I realize I'm kind of just asking to get like a full-on isometric RPG and a strategy RPG. Though it's kind of amazing those two haven't mixed, now that I think of that, or at least mixed in a more portable manner, I should say. I'm sure there's PC versions that are just like that. Hell, I'm fairly certain that was it Divinity that did that? There's some things that technically build themselves as roguelikes that I'm fairly certain have done a mix of those kinds of things, but quite frankly, a lot of that kind of stuff I haven't really gotten into as much, because a lot of the like full PC dedicated stuff I just never really can get into these days. Not really necessarily because of the game itself, but it's just most of the time whenever I'm going and routing and testing and whatever else for all these different games, I end up just doing so for stuff I can play on the Vita, because usually I'm on the phone or doing my calls or whatever else, or I'm trying to get work done, and if I end up doing multiple things at once, I like to have devices that are each able to do one thing. So for example, I have all games and mods and whatever else on my Vita. I'm usually doing calls and whatever else on my phone, usually doing paperwork or whatever other projects people need done on my laptop, and or go over to a desktop for the same thing. Sometimes I'm literally just sitting here trying to work on 4 screens at once, which I'm sure does not do any wonders for actually getting stuff done in a reasonable amount of time, but hey. Now, I believe this part I need to skip. Alright, yeah, I completely forgot that I put a bit of a pause in the video here. It happens. So, okay, there we go. Moving on with the actual fight here. Yeah, I believe one of the kiddos was fussing or some such. Alright, so this is going to be about, I think, like session 4 or 5 in reality here. Let's go ahead and get this wrapped up, see what's left of this particular run. Seems like currently we're just doing a whole lot of sitting in place. That's fantastic. Absolutely fascinating. Not really sure why I left this part in, but hopefully the pause doesn't last too long. As you do. Alright. Done any time now, pause. Okay, and we're back to it. So what are we looking at here? Yeah, you might hear, since this is another section here, or another session, I should say, I might hear that there's an iPad going on in the background, and one of the kiddos talking there. But either way, yeah, it's I just want to go ahead and get this one wrapped up, even if the timing's not optimal. So usually the ideal approach here on most parts of this map is actually to take the right side and then just kind of confront them over there. Now, Orgeau here is a little bit of a weird one, in that for some reason he loves hanging out around the center of the map. And actually, if you see that little square in the center, that little water tile there, if you end up killing him with a knockback into that particular tile, for some reason he falls through the map some of the times. I'm not really sure why. It's a bizarre bug to have there. I think what the reason why is because normally when a flying unit falls down a hole, like I'm assuming that one must be classed as a hole instead of water for some reason. But normally when a flying unit falls down, it does the little check to put them back up to where they were because they can fly. Which I'm assuming what happened in that case is just, since he's a leader, if he ends up getting knocked down, since he doesn't have an immunity to knockback, and since he doesn't really have an immunity to falling because there's nothing that he should be able to fall off of here, that he would just fall through the map. Now, it's not consistent because I've tried it a few times since, and I've had a hard time recreating it. But either way, it's an interesting little bug there. But it's one way that you can potentially get yourself screwed out of some things and some routes. It's weird to see that happen, but you know, like I was mentioning in the last part, it's rare to run into bugs in this game. Like, I mean, yeah, imbalances sure, but bugs, no. This thing is pretty freaking solid. So okay, yeah. So Apollinaire here, just like any other night boss, really. We're just trying to get all strong, carve through right to them, give them the old double fang, and call it a day. Nothing really terribly special going on here. But yeah, lots of different fights in this particular map. I really like the night map here. It just looks really, really stylish. They get some Terranites coming in. They're not really going to be too much of an issue, because as per usual, they forgot to they just replaced their armor with tissues as a joke. I don't know. Maybe they just felt that they were trying a little bit too hard, so they just sabotaged them. So went over here, got rid of the healer just to save a little bit of time. Those guys I just figured, yeah, would just pretty much commit with the thing they're committing that I probably shouldn't say out loud because reasons. Anyway, so yeah, next attack will be Apollinaire. Now, if I recall correctly, she wound up being a little bit tougher than I expected at this point. I think she was able to take 2 double fangs, or I might be thinking of somebody else. I don't know. It's this part's gone on for an extended period of time here. And one moment. Alrighty, and back with no technical pause because the magic of editing, which is gonna take for friggin' ever, because this is like an hour and a half plus situation here. Which I have to point out, by the way, one of the reasons that it's taken so long to put all of these out is just the fact that my editor kind of completely breaks in half as soon as it gets past about 30 minutes. And chopping these up into smaller parts ends up breaking it even farther, so a lot of time is just kind of spent sitting there waiting for it to stop trying to crash. Granted, you know, that would be fixed by actually putting some money in the project, but hey, that's not really realistic. Anywho, so that's why she ended up taking 2 of them here. That was the issue. That's he ended up getting that Frighten off and ended up getting to be a bit of a problem. He's just sitting there being annoying the entire friggin' time, and yeah, then she puts the phalanx out pretty much as soon as, just like any of the night bosses, as soon as they end up surviving one, they put up phalanx, and then it's just pretty much, well, sitting around and waiting for their armor to fall off, basically. Kind of an annoying skill. Definitely one of those ones that kind of tended to get in the way of a lot of runs in the base game. Just because there's so many bosses that you can't quite finish them off because they've got you know, the height night defenses and all that kind of thing. But then as soon as you try to go for the whole tag team thing, they're just sitting there like, nope, I'm a turtle now. Just like, okay, sweet. I guess I need to get a car then, and or just wait. Gonna have to wait forever. Though then again, you know, I saw this turtle at a pet store a few weeks ago, and that thing was like, hell, the size of a small couch. That thing was awesome. There's this it's kind of like it's kind of unusual pet store around here that they've got some stuff that you wouldn't be able to find anywhere else. And yeah, that thing was just massive. I could absolutely see, like, if I was, you know what, if I was a kid and that thing was at home, I would absolutely try to ride that thing around like a car. Alright, so Vice gets tortured, and we move on to the next part of the game here. Now, there was a bad bit of info that was given out a while ago that got me nervous on so many runs, and I don't know who posted this up on a guide, but basically somebody had posted that if you go for the top route here, the Vice just automatically dies. Now, I don't know if that's true under some circumstances, but as far as I'm aware, this is literally just, would you like one fight or would you like another with no real consequences? Maybe it was that he died there if you went there in the original. With the story logic, as I understand it, being that, well, that if you end up trying to get into the same fight that got everyone else killed, then you end up taking more time to get to where you need to go, at which point he doesn't survive the whole torture-y thing, which, I mean, it's going to take you several days anyway, but yeah. So, went up to Baldur here. I was just kind of looking if there were any side differences that I was missing, and no, not really. So yeah, you can go for either one. If you end up going for the wield here, you got to deal with this guy. This is one of the ones that I made a bit of a mistake on here because I got a little bit overconfident. So we'll see that in just a moment here. Basically, between the two of them, the only real benefit of going for this fight over the other one, like if you're going for a solo run, this part is a little bit easier on a solo, just because it takes less time and there's less exorcisms in the way. The other one's just a really long swamp up to a Necromancer, which you could probably just take out with rocks, but then, you know, you might potentially run into other issues along the way. But yeah, this is what I mean by a mistake was made. And this is what I mean by how insane Petrification can be, because he just gets petrified and that's it. Fight's done. Like, it doesn't matter how low their damage is or whatever else, they will just keep doing this. Somehow they keep missing a frickin' statue, but, you know, his natural evasion is just that high, I guess. Sitting there getting hit over and over. That quench animation. Not very, not very prevalent right now, but man, that thing ends up getting so much mileage before the end of the game. So yeah, this is what happens when you roll high on Petrification. Basically, I mentioned this last time, but it can roll roughly between 1 to 5 rounds. Sometimes it just drops off immediately. It actually rolls for RT ticks, so it doesn't actually roll a certain number of turns. It's just like, here's how much is added, here's how much RT duration is for this debuff, and yeah, this is like max roll right here. That he just pretty much went down by hits of 15 to 20. There was just nothing to do at this point. I was thinking like, okay, if literally I even get a single turn, then we're good. But then he just crits that 19 and it's all over. Yeah, Petrification's a bit of a harsh one sometimes. And again, thank you RNG. It was like not only was it a low % hit, it even, you know, it just maxed out all the time for it. All right, moving on to second attempt at this one. Yeah, I had you might notice another little sound difference. Had to have a little bit of a pause because my well, it's a funny situation here because I got my dog right here that likes to sit next to my leg. And then my daughter doesn't really want to ever, like, adjust the animals in any way. So she's, like, awkwardly coming up trying to ask for a snack, except can't really figure out to tip sideways, and doesn't want to move the dog, so she's just there, like, repeatedly running into my desk. Like, I just look over and, like, what are you doing? She's, like looking up, just, like, just gives a sad little look. Snack! Smacks her head on the desk. Like, stop doing that! This hurts to watch. But anyway, she's all good. She's got her nice little applesauce pouch now. Alright, so yeah, same, similar thing as before, except this time going and doing a little bit more teleporting. I was really stingy with the Chariot cards over the course, or not Chariot, but Wheel of Fortune cards over the course of this run, which really I didn't need to be. Ultimately, I ended up getting an unlimited amount of them, but there was really no need for me to be so friggin' stingy with them. Probably could have saved a lot of time by just teleporting everywhere. Which, yeah, if you've seen the world record speedruns for this one, it's one of those things that gets used all the time because it's just such a broken thing that you get almost immediately, especially at the very start. I know one of the world record things is pretty much that you have to, one of your starting 5 cards has to be a Wheel of Fortune, and then they always just max out decks and then just repeatedly try to teleport around as much as possible. You usually only end up getting about 3 to 4 of them on a standard run. Sometimes you get like a friggin' dozen, sometimes you get next to none, but you know, that's just lovely RNG for you. Now, nice thing with Gamp here, none of the flying monster types have Rampart Aura on them, at least not these ones, so makes it nice and easy to get up to them. This fight is one of the ones that turned out to be next to impossible to figure out on the One Vision solo. That's one of the ones that made me think that it was next to, well, I'm not actually sure if this same route is possible on OV whatsoever. Like, I mentioned that before, but it's looking more and more likely that that's just not going to be the case. And because, yeah, I've tried a lot of different things. I've tried a lot of really dirty strategies and all that kind of thing. and then keep running into the same thing where it's just the items and everything else are not really on hand to quite finish a lot of stuff off. Like, so far, I've had some minor success by going for, like, a warrior double impact build, and just kind of going for, like, if the first one hits and the second one crits, that's usually enough to finish off a heavy unit, which is what the problem is with trying to route that one. But yeah, so far no dice. I'll update if anything happens. And actually, today, there was somebody that was asking about where to pick up Dark and Holy Dragons and all that kind of thing over the course of any particular run. Surprisingly, Almarca has all of them. If it's a daytime thing, they're always guarded by, or at least usually guarded by light ones, and then if it's night, they're usually guarded by Tiamats here. Actually, they're called Tiamats, I think only in OV. Whatever the dark thingy, evil Durgan thingy. Thankfully, they don't make you get the zombie ones. That would be a pain in the nads, but yeah. That's just life for you. That's just life. I'm surprised actually that that's never come up in any of the interviews. Like, I think I mentioned this before, but it's like I've read through every interview that I could find, and for some reason nobody asks like why is there such painful grinding in some places, with exception to Deneb. That was the one time that somebody asked me, you know, like, did you mean for this to be so punishing? They're like, no, we didn't mean it. We were trying to be nice. But then at the same time, like. But Coda, though. Let's talk about Coda for a second. Because you kinda are required to go through a friggin' 115 floor thing. What happened there? Because that sounds pretty mean. I don't know. It's alright. Then we got Zabos' last stand here. This is one of those few times you can actually get a Necro mark. If you didn't know, you can actually get a Necro on every route, depending on how you do it. Now, the thing is, in most cases, in most casual runs and whatever else, folks won't necessarily have the materials to do it. So if you have a recruit, you can just pick up this one. I believe it's neutral and law that you can do that. And then for chaos, there's a guy that can drop them, I believe. But one way or another, on all routes, I believe there's at least one in the story somewhere, like guarding one of the castles. Like, if I recall correctly, there's one guarding Branton on one of the routes for some reason. Is that right? No, not Branton. Dang it. I know there's 3 castle fights with Necros in there. And then there's also always the one in the Palace of the Dead. So again, bunch of guides out there that are saying that there's no availability for Necromancers and all that kind of thing on certain routes. So I got in a bag off the Necro. I figured, okay, this, maybe he dropped the mark. The thing is, I forgot at this point that this one doesn't drop the Necro mark. He can't. He can be hired, and a mark can be stolen from him, but he doesn't drop it, and I don't know why I forgot it at the time. But then again, so many moving parts around, forget something. So, okay. That's the double fang enough to finish him off. Just. Yep. Gets DDS'd, and then he's gone. I'm sure I'm not the only one that used to play the hell out of RuneScape back in the day. Because every time I see Double Fang, I'm just thinking the DDS special, which it ended up being called the DDS just because there was the Dragon Dagger Poisoned, which had a super poison on it that was with a little S notation on it. So it's just the DDS is what it was generally known as. But yeah, it was kind of everybody's preferred assassination dealie in that game. It's just like in PvP, somebody would just come up and just like shank, and it's like, oh crap, I've got 10 health left, and that poison's hitting for 5. So it wasn't great. Anywho, there we go. Actually, what am I saying? Back in the day, that thing was great. So there we go. That's part 3. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the following parts. Take care.